I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know how to communicate. When I thought about sex and my own body and sexuality, it just felt like this very icky, gray, murky, uncomfortable thing. Watching 8-person gangbangs, I started talking to this girl who I really liked. I started to feel safe again. Hello, thank you so much for being here with me today. I wanted to drop into another conversation about sex and sexuality and how I reclaim my sexual sovereignty, how I just really empowered myself. All these little really important things that I have learned on my journey that I did not learn in sex education. But I only had one sex talk when I was in 5th grade, and we just learned the bare minimum about periods and pregnancy, and I didn't have another sex talk until senior year of high school. I never had one with my parents, so I was going into this world as like a horny young woman, knowing nothing about boundaries or consent or self-love or kinks or just communication in general. And so I have learned a lot of lessons through the struggle, and I thought maybe making this video I could help empower you and you can learn from my mistakes. Whether you have sex or not is completely valid, and this is a safe space for all people of all identities. I just want to say that. And I learned the bare minimum in school about sex and the sexual exchange that happens, but I learned so much from life experience, including shame and guilt and slut shaming and misogyny. Those are things that I learned along my journey as a young woman that I have really worked to decondition and liberate myself from. So I took some further education into my own hands and started watching porn, which, as we all know, is a very skewed perception or idea of what sex actually supposed to be like. There's a lot that you don't learn from porn, but I started watching it and I started exploring my body really young. I would do it in a mirror just because I was so curious what everything looked like and what everything did, and I started squirting when I was really young, and I popped my own cherry, or like my hymen, myself, which I always felt really embarrassed about because I was like, damn, I was just kind of in my room alone and I didn't share that with someone else. But now as I've gotten older, I'm really glad that I was the one to give myself that experience. I didn't even know what was happening until a few hours later. I saw some blood in my underwear, and I think it took me a whole year to realize what that actually was. And I'm really glad that I gave myself that experience. Yeah, rather than sharing that with someone else who maybe didn't treat me with care. But I feel, if you've ever watched the movie Desire on Netflix, I feel like the little girl from that movie who was just so ready to go and just so sexually activated and open and realized the power of sexuality, or really was just overcome by it initially. I didn't realize that I could harness this power and direct it in my very own way. But I am really grateful that my first sexual experiences were all with myself, in my room, in my safe space. And I think that sexual exploration on your own is the most important thing when you're healing your sexual energy, trying to reclaim your body, giving that orgasm to yourself, sharing that magic just with yourself, and using your orgasm intentionally. Those are all things that I learned are so important. And I wanted to quickly segue into the sponsor of today's video, which is Lelo. They're a luxury sex toy company all about empowering female sexual pleasure and ending stigmas around this conversation. I'm so grateful to have a sponsor on these videos talking about sex because they do not get monetized, but this is the Soraya Wave dual massager, and this thing is incredible. Let me tell you, all the girls that I've hooked up with and a lot of my friends have a toy like this. I feel like this is so essential to so many of my friends' collections. This has a little G-spot massager and a clitoral massager. It took me so long to invest in an actual nice sex toy, but now I feel like it's so worth it to invest in something really nice that you're gonna put in your body repeatedly and not skimp out on that. So I highly recommend their toys. Their website will be linked down below, and I just wanted to show you what I love about this toy is that you can activate it so just the bottom, the G-spot massager moves, or you can make it so that just the clitoral massager vibrates. Of course, there are so many settings for both of them, and you can intensify the vibration and lower the vibration, which is really nice for me because I'm really sensitive. You can use this so many different ways. It took me a while to enter into this world of sex toys, but I really get it now, and I keep this in my lingerie drawer, and anytime I just want to give myself the experience of being fully enraptured, I know what I'm grabbing. Like I said, their website will be linked down below, and hopefully you can find something just right for you that will give you that same experience of rippling pleasure that you deserve. But yeah, I had some really wholesome experiences with myself initially. I just think that the kind of porn and sex that I was watching at a young age was just really scarring and not okay for my soul and my body and my spirit. Like watching 8-person gangbangs or watching, I don't know, just there's so much stuff online that I don't think young people should be absorbing and learning about sex through, because we just get such a skewed perception about how this sacred exchange is supposed to go down. And I started to explore with other people in my life. I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know about consent. I didn't know that I could say no. And this, of course, brought me into a lot of situations that I really didn't like. And I felt like my body language, I would try to say something and they wouldn't understand it, or I would say no once and they would just try and convince me to keep going to do certain sexual acts, like the boys that were my age that I was hooking up with. And I was like, okay, I already said no and they're still trying, and so I guess like I'm powerless in this situation. And I kind of got used to those kinds of sexual exchanges all throughout not only my like initial high school hooking up life experience, but even up until my late teens and early 20s. I thought in my head, you know, this is just what happens, this is just how it is. I didn't really know that I could stick up for myself, and I felt really awkward and introverted and shy and ugly, and I was just like, I'm just here, like I'm lucky if someone wants to do anything with me. I think that every person needs to have somewhere safe they can go to talk about sex and talk about what's going on in their lives sexually, because you can really get yourself into a lot of trouble if you don't have at least one outlet, one safe space where you can tell an adult, a grown-up, a friend what you're going through so that they can empower you, reassure you, and teach you and guide you. I didn't have any of that. I barely even had any structure in my household, so it was just all really like I was just out there doing a field study, just learning through experience, moment to moment. And it is embarrassing the amount of times I walked to a guy's house, smoked with him, got taken advantage of, did things I didn't want to do, and then walked myself back home at like 3 a.m. alone. I'm just like, they were so lucky. I didn't even realize how much power I had, but we're gonna get to that. Anyways, I started to feel that my body wasn't a safe space, especially as I actually started developing boobs and getting a lot more attention from the opposite sex. I just started to feel like my body gets me into trouble, and my body just makes me feel pain, and my body makes me feel used and objectified. And initially I was really excited to like get boobs and to be, you know, attractive and finally start getting attention from boys. But then I started to get slut shamed in my school. Boys would say things about me that weren't true. I went on a date with a guy to the movies, and he told everyone the next day that I slept with him in the movie theater, that we had sex in the movie theater, which I would never do. And also in 7th grade even, I played 7 minutes in heaven with someone, and they fingered me for literally 0.2 seconds. And I went to school bright and starry-eyed the summer after 7th grade. Someone literally went up to me in the cafeteria and was like, oh my God, you don't look pregnant. And I was like, what is going on? So yeah, from a really early age, I was like, this is just, I don't like the way that this feels. I'm just constantly being objectified. Now girls already don't like me. Like I wasn't liked, I thought before, because I wasn't pretty or cool enough or rich enough or whatever. But now I'm not being liked just because of the way that I look. And it just felt backwards, and it made me start to feel unsafe in my body. And then I moved for high school, and I just decided to keep the lowest profile. I didn't hook up with people. I was just a little loner. I bounced around from little groups, but I minded my own business. I think that this is where the internalized misogyny started to kick in, because I felt like then my only power was in my sexuality, and I just assumed that that's all people were looking at or valuing me for. And I think that was really toxic and negative, because I started to play into that, like, oh, if this is all you see in me, then that's just what I'm gonna be, you know? It was like, I'm just gonna be this one-dimensional person and dress this type of way. But I had an experience of sexual assault when I was working at a country club with my boss, who was so much older than me. When I was 15 years old, I was 15 in junior year. I graduated at 17, so I was pretty young. I'm sure that other people are like in that same age range. But I think that was one of the last straws where I just really started to become undone and feel just so shameful and resentful of my body. He got me drunk and left me with no one else to take me home. Some things went down that I don't want to talk about. And then I went to work like a few days later, maybe even the next day, and it was like everyone at my office knew about it at my job, but I just felt shameful. You know, I felt so embarrassed about what happened. I just felt like it was all on me and that he didn't do anything wrong. And I just felt embarrassed because everyone was talking about this thing and no one at all in any way was like, are you okay? Are you like, what happened? Because I was 15 and he was definitely in his like mid to late 40s. And so I quit my job, kind of just left and never went back. And I feel like I just went a little bit crazy after that, just allowed the way that I felt about my body to carry through in my actions. So I was like, fuck it, like people are just gonna take advantage of me, like let me just let this energy run wild. And so I was hooking up with people that I didn't care about, that I felt unsafe with. Eventually this kind of settled down when I started talking to this girl who I really liked. I dated her for a month, I think, and we had sex and it was really nice. My first sexual experience. I started to feel safe again. And what I can say about all of my experiences with women, because I started hooking up with girls when I was really young, in like 8th grade. First kiss with a girl, I was stoned in my living room couch and we made out and it was amazing. But I have been hooking up with girls like since the time that I was attracted to boys, and I realized that when I hooked up with women, I started to learn the level of consent and boundaries that we could have for each other. So with this girl, the first girl that I hooked up with, it felt so safe and so consensual, and the whole time it was like, is this okay with you? And just really, women are just so tuned into each other's body language and are just so emotionally intelligent, especially like at that young age. I think she was a year older than me, and I was like, whoa, okay, I can have this level of respect during sex and feel so aligned with someone. She was also very spiritual, so it was also just that first spiritual kind of connection that I had with someone where I saw them for much more than their physical body, and I was also seen for much more than just this physical vessel, and it was really incredible. I don't think either of us came, but it just felt really good, and that's another thing, you don't have to come every single time during sex. I started to feel this like level of anxiety creep up every time after I would see her. Even though I liked her so much and she would make my heart so warm, every time after we would hang out, I would feel this little anxiety creep up, and I didn't know what it was because I felt so fully accepting about my sexuality, identify as queer, realized that even though I, in my conscious mind, was okay with what was happening, there was still this subconscious conditioning and shaming that I learned in the church that this wasn't okay. I couldn't shake it, and I ended up breaking things off with her because it was like the anxiety would overcome all of the good, lovey feelings that I would have for her. I really liked her, I just couldn't work through that on my own. And I didn't have a queer community around me. It's so important to have fellow queer people around you. I just felt in many ways very icky, and when I thought about sex and my own body and sexuality, it just felt like this very icky, gray, murky, uncomfortable thing. So I decided to go celibate. Now, this was the first thing that was so pivotal in me learning to reclaim my sexual energy and giving my power back to myself. And this is when I really learned how to speak my boundaries, because of course, all of those same old hookups would hit me up, and I told all of them, like, look, I'm not having sex right now. If you want to hang out as friends, let's do it. Otherwise, I can't hang. I really learned that if someone can't respect my boundaries, then there's no point of having them in my life. Because why would you want someone in your life who doesn't respect you or honor you physically? And especially if they're not honoring you physically, then they probably won't honor you spiritually. And so my skin got so tough because I was like, okay, I look around me and all of the guys that I was friends with before, they're gone. So I'd rather just have that clear and honest communication, like, this isn't what I'm seeking, and this isn't what you're seeking. You're not seeking friendship, so let's just be real about it and save ourselves the time. I was so excited about it. You know, I was so excited for any opportunity to speak my boundaries at that point, because I was like, absolutely nothing is going inside of me except for my own fingers, and that's that. I spent 9 months doing this. I traveled, you know, there were so many opportunities and situations where guys were like, oh, trying to get all up in there, and I was just like, no, I don't do that. So it really just felt like this chapter in this journey of fully, truly giving myself back to me. And then when I finally did start having sex again, it was with someone who fully respected me spiritually, physically, on all planes of being. And I was like, wow, I'm really letting the universe know what I'm worthy of receiving. Before, I was letting all these people in who didn't treat me how I deserved and were giving me like less than half of what I was actually looking for in a sexual exchange or, you know, a partner. And now that I've said no repeatedly to those kinds of connections, I'm making space. I've made space for something so much more loving, fulfilling, something that I can really grow with. And I met my partner who I was with for almost 3 years, and we explored a lot of tantric practices together. And I really, that was kind of a little sexual realization moment for me. Like, okay, I've learned to speak my boundaries. I've cut out toxic connections to people who I don't feel safe with. And now I'm having sex where I'm fully respected and seen spiritually. And that was so, so healing. I learned to start intentionally masturbating, rising the energy up my spine. And I started to realize the power of my orgasm. I might have mentioned this in my last video, but I'll briefly cover how I normally, after I would come, I would feel like a little bit of shame, a little bit of guilt, a little bit of like, ooh, that was like dirty, you know? I would feel less pure, which I think is such societal conditioning that a woman having sex makes her less pure, when really it's this incredibly powerful, high vibrational energy. And so I would feel that guilt and shame. Sometimes I would feel like I had to cry during sex, and I think it's because of that prior sexual misconduct that was still lingering within me. And so even if I was with a partner that I felt safe with, I would just feel so overwhelmed and start to cry, and I would like hide my tears. But I started to work through this with this partner who I was consistently having sex with, of course, and I one day felt those same feelings of anxiety and shame and nothingness creep up my spine, and I decided to just have the intention to feel joy and laughter when I came. And so the next time I came, I just felt this surge of laughter and peace wash over me, and I was just giggling, and I felt so full of wonder, and I was like, whoa, this is literally the power of my mind. I can really do this. And I came 2 more times after that, and I felt those same feelings of joy and safety. I just made space for a new experience. I will set an intention for my sexual energy. This is healing. This is deep spiritual work. And so I started to do that. And when it comes to healing sexual trauma, I also think that psychotherapy is so important. So I also spoke to a therapist about a lot of the things that were happening to me. And I think that's really important. I definitely believe in holistic practices. They've like changed my life. But I also think that we can implement these more Western forms of healing, like therapy. And therapy, I'm just a huge advocate for. I feel like the way that I viewed sexual energy started to shift, and I genuinely just started to feel safe in my body through therapy, through consistently sleeping with a partner who fully respected me, and through doing intentional yoni egg masturbation. And a lot of times when I would use my yoni egg, I wouldn't use it to finish. I would use it to bring awareness to my pelvic floor, to my vaginal muscles, and strengthen them, and ultimately to my energy. So with the egg inside of me, I would just inhale and rock my hips upward and squeeze and really visualize the sexual energy rising up my spine. And I would exhale and release and feel that energy coming back down to replenish me in this loop, sometimes called the microcosmic orbit. And so that's what I would do with my yoni egg, and realize that, yeah, not every sexual interaction has to lead to a climax, and you can just keep that energy inside of you. I also started to surround myself with other people who were really empowered sexually, women who really knew their worth, who were really good at speaking their boundaries, who didn't normalize misogyny. And being surrounded by a queer community is so important, because I think so many of us have had sexually violating experiences, especially my trans and non-binary friends. You really learn just moment-to-moment consent and communication. I mentioned earlier in this video, anytime I would hook up with girls, and this is like my standard for everyone now, but we would ask each other, is this okay with you? Does this feel good? Can I touch you here? Hooking up with someone who is non-binary or someone who is trans, it's like certain parts of their body might trigger certain memories or fear or make them have body dysphoria. And so I really learned to treat someone's entire body with care and ask permission and make sure that they feel safe anywhere that I'm stroking or touching them. And now I bring that into all of my sexual exchanges. Like, do you like this? Is this okay? And I think for the first 5 years that I was having sex, I didn't do this. I didn't know that we could have that level of communication and just really be on the same page. But I really like that, and it makes me feel so safe, especially initially. Like that first time that you're getting to know each other's bodies, you should definitely be exploring and asking what their boundaries are and just making sure that they feel okay moment to moment. I pretty much stopped having flings or one-night stands. I never was a fan of one-night stands because I get very emotionally attached, and I feel like it's such a sacred energetic exchange that like I need to handle it with care. But that doesn't mean that I don't have casual sex. The only thing is I want to continue to have sex with that same person, so it's not just a one-off. It's like, let's grow together sexually and spiritually, and I only really sleep with people who I have a spiritual connection with, who I feel like I can meditate with, and who see me beyond just my physical body. I was once with this partner for a short period of time who I felt really connected to spiritually, but sexually it just was, I felt kind of not kink shamed, but I felt like I wasn't being met sexually where I wanted to be. I would ask to be choked or spanked, and he was like, where does this urge come from? Like, he didn't explicitly say this, but he was like, were you hurt when you were younger? Like, I feel like you're just playing out some messed up thing that happened to you. And I was like, I felt kind of offended. I was like, what? And he would also make comments about me like rubbing my clit. The clitoris is there for pleasure. Like if we weren't supposed to use it and feel pleasure, then it wouldn't be there. But in the Taoist lineage, they say that the clitoral orgasm is more draining for anyone with a yoni, and that a vaginal orgasm is an easier way to keep all of your energy inside and to fill yourself up with like vibrant life energy. And so I would be rubbing my clit and he'd be like, I see your energy going everywhere. Like you should keep it in your body. And I was like, I didn't ask for your feedback on that. And I just want to do something because it feels good, you know? There was a lot of dissonance, and I just felt like there was something wrong with the things that I wanted. And I kind of went down this wormhole of like, is there something wrong with me that I want to be fully dominated every now and then and be choked and spanked and really tied up? On some level, yes, I think it is really healing to play out different sexual scenarios that may have been traumatizing back in the day, but do it in a way that is controlled, safe, and consensual, where you have the power and you're actually guiding the dynamic that's happening. You know, I think that there is something healing to that, but on the other hand, it's just because it feels good to be wanted and dominated. I realize that sometimes you're just not sexually compatible with someone, and that is okay, but that won't change. It was a hard lesson to learn. Sometimes you're just not sexually compatible with someone, and you can try to do different things, but if it feels forced, the chances are that that feeling isn't going to go away. And then I started to see someone who was very much in the BDSM community, had a whole wall of toys, and he was like, if you ever want to use any of these, let me know. And so slowly we started exploring the different things on his wall, and there's a lot of conversation before and after care, you know, like, did that feel good for you? Is that okay? We would cuddle for hours before and after, and so that just felt really good to explore some of those more like rough or intense fantasies and desires in a really safe way. And I'm really happy to explore that part of myself without shame. I love just making passionate love, of course, but I also, you know, I felt really sexually empowered in that moment and knew that all of my desires were so valid. And all of those things have really helped me work through my traumas and conditioning, and have made me feel so much lighter and freer in my sexuality and my sexual expression, even knowing that I can dress any way that I want, and that doesn't mean that I'm asking for anything, and that I can be a sexually empowered, liberated woman, that I can talk about sex, that I can share openly, and that doesn't make me a slut, and that doesn't make me any less worthy of respect. Yeah, I think healing has to happen on many planes. So the psychotherapy, you know, the therapy was really important, but also the somatic therapy in my body, learning to feel safe again with my intention, with my yoni egg, with my celibacy, and then making space to only have connections in my life that feel fully nurturing on all levels. And the more comfortable and safe and seen that you feel as someone, the better the sex. So yeah, those are just some of the things that have helped me on my journey, and I just really want to make it be known and remind you that whatever you feel when you have sex is valid. It's so easy to be so hard on yourself and be so mean to yourself when you feel shame or you feel guilt or you feel anxious and just be like, why do I feel this way? take a deep breath and remind yourselves that there is a reason for all of these feelings that are coming up. And if you need to talk to someone and seek professional help, then you should do that. If you need to just make space for the fact that sex doesn't have to feel like that on a mental level, and just open yourself up to the fact that sex can be really beautiful and safe and healing, then make space for that, you know, with your intention and with who you choose to let into your life. And basically, nothing that you can feel is wrong. None of your kinks or desires, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Yeah, there is space for everything that you feel and everything that you are, and please affirm that to yourself in this moment. And I wanted to give another quick thank you to Lelo for sponsoring today's video and supporting conversations like this. If you want to shop their luxury sex toys, it'll be the first link in my description box below. And I just hope that you are kind to yourselves today and present with wherever you are on your healing journey. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in a video soon. Bye!